text messaging has made it easier for people to communicate with loved ones. In just a few seconds, a person can share photos or videos with friends and family, or just have a quick conversation while multitasking. But this form of contact, being so accessible and simple, can often cause it to be used as a means to harass or intimidate people. Hiding behind a screen makes many people feel more comfortable, and sometimes that can lead to disturbing messages that may have not otherwise been delivered. These are 5 disturbing text messages sent before murder. Number 5. Albert Simon had only been dating Carolee Taylor for a few months before the couple parted ways in December of 2019. Just a week after telling Simon she no longer wanted to be in a relationship, Taylor was celebrating her 46th birthday. It was Christmas Eve, and friends and family of Taylor were gathered around at her uncle's home in Houston, Texas. Just moments after singing happy birthday, Simon's black Jeep Cherokee slowly pulled past the home and quickly turned around to park in front of the house. Taylor's uncle had noticed the vehicle and went outside, where he was greeted by Simon, who was holding a shotgun as well as a pistol. Simon forced the man back inside of the house, exclaiming that he had a bone to pick and demanded to speak to Taylor. Witnesses say that Simon then approached Taylor, telling her that they needed to talk before taking her outside to the porch. Seconds later, 5 shots were fired, and Taylor died instantly, suffering 1 gunshot wound to her head and 4 to the chest as she collapsed. Simon fled the scene, and police were immediately dispatched to the residence. While questioning the family, Taylor's daughter came forward and told investigators that her mother had received a text message earlier that day from Simon that read, "Are you ready to party with Jesus tonight?" among other threatening things. Simon evaded law enforcement for 4 days. During that time, he called a friend and admitted to killing Taylor. He also called a funeral home, giving them instructions for his own burial. At some point, Simon abandoned his Jeep in Dallas before making his way back to Houston. Officers located Simon at Herman Park in Houston. The 52-year-old suspect was sitting on a bench with a small black shoulder bag beside him. Identifying themselves as law enforcement with a warrant for his arrest, Simon was ordered to get on the ground. Instead of complying, Simon picked up his bag and began walking away into the crowded park. When he began to reach into his bag, an officer fired at him twice, fearing that Simon may have still been armed and dangerous. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead on arrival. Taylor's friends and family don't know what may have prompted Simon to take her life. They were unaware of the details of their short relationship, and during the investigation, it was discovered that Simon had been charged with stalking back in 1993, and his ex-wife was granted a restraining order on him in 2014. Number 4. On March 11, 2015, 32-year-old Andrew White received a series of text messages from an acquaintance, Jeffrey Knobble. It was just after 2 a.m. when Knobble reached out to White looking for a place to stay. He said, "What's good, bro? You trying to chill?" and informed White that he was recently left homeless and needed help. White had a reputation around the city of Easton, Pennsylvania, as being a good man who would go out of his way to help anyone. He was an active mentor at the local Boys and Girls Club and volunteered his time to make a positive impact in as many lives as he could. Because he'd already had people staying with him at his apartment, but didn't want Knobble on the street, he offered to set up Knobble at a local motel for 2 nights. He sent a message to Knobble saying, "The motel website is offering rooms for $62. I'll book it for you online right now if you want me to which Knobble replied yes. A clerk working at the gas station across from the motel recalls the 2 men coming in together. She says that White instructed Knobble to pick out some things that he wanted and paid the tab without getting anything for himself. The men then walked to the motel. Surveillance shows White on the 4th floor approaching the room he rented for Knobble at 5:14 a.m. It was the last time that he would be seen alive. Over an hour later, Knobble is seen leaving the room to visit his mother's house nearby. While talking to his mother, Knobble pulled out his cell phone from his pocket and began showing her pictures and videos of a man's lifeless body surrounded by a pool of blood. He went into detail on how he had the desire to kill members of law enforcement, just as he had the man in the photos, before leaving her home. Knobble's mother immediately called the police to report him. Knobble returned to the motel room where he remained for the next 3.5 hours. White, who also suffered a single gunshot wound to the head, was face down on the bed. It's unclear what Knobble did for the hours he was in the motel room with the man that he just murdered, but he eventually returned to his mother's home, where he was arrested after a 1-hour standoff with police. Initially, Knobble was detained for making terroristic threats, but later that afternoon, when White's body was discovered, he was charged with the murder. While speaking to his public defender, Knobel said that he was ready to plead guilty to all charges, but when the time came for him to enter his plea, he proclaimed that he was innocent while taunting the victim's family. His behavior in the courtroom became so appalling that Judge Giordano ordered Knobel to wear a stun belt on his leg so deputies could shock him if he began to act out. On February 1st, 2017, Jeffrey Knobel was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Andrew White. Number 3. Sabrina Rosario separated from her husband, Jose Valdivia, in November of 2018. By June of 2019, realizing that there was no chance for reconciliation, she filed for divorce. Unable to let his marriage go, Jose began constantly harassing Rosario through text messages and phone calls. He would show up at her house unannounced and watch her from his vehicle. Jose took things a step further and broke into the San Diego, California home in July to retrieve his tools. The police were called and informed that Jose needed to stay away from Rosario. Over the next 4 months, Jose ignored Rosario's threats of filing for a restraining order against him, saying that a piece of paper wasn't going to do anything. On November 6th, he sent her a picture of his handgun surrounded by beer cans and a bottle of alcohol, captioned, "It's sure happening." Afraid for her life, as well as the lives of her 4 children, Rosario presented the court with the messages to get a restraining order. Included in her evidence was a text message from November 8th, where Jose was outside of her home and knew that she was not home, and knew that the children were being cared for by her sister. The next day, Rosario had told him to leave her alone, to which he replied, "I'm not leaving you alone, you know that." A few days later, on November 13th, Jose requested to see his children at the house, pleading for reconciliation and saying, "You know I'm not ever going to leave you alone." The court granted Rosario a temporary restraining order on November 15th. Although police are not certain Jose was legally served at the time, Rosario's friends and family claim she informed him of the order during one of his many attempts to make contact with her during a phone call. The next morning, on November 16th, 2009, 911 dispatchers received a call from the home at approximately 6:40 a.m. An argument could be heard within the residence before the line went dead. Officers arrived at the scene and discovered Rosario and her 4 children deceased. After killing his family, Jose turned the gun on himself. One of the children survived the attack and spent 2 weeks in the hospital following an emergency surgery, but succumbed to his injuries later on. Jose's family said they had no idea that he was capable of such a horrendous thing, and that he always seemed like a happy family man. Rosario's friends and family have reported that the marriage had been strained over the years when Rosario discovered he had an affair for the second time. The 29-year-old mother did everything she could to shield and protect her children from the negativity within the home. A young couple, Mark and Jen, met as teenagers in 1986. By the time 1993 came around, the two had married and begun a life together. In 2011, the couple moved to Greensville, South Carolina. They both had careers in marketing and had settled into a beautiful life together, often taking trips to the beach and exploring the mountains. By all accounts, the couple had a normal and seemingly happy relationship. By 2017, Jen had been laid off at her job, and her relentless searches for future employment were fruitless. The pair decided that this was the perfect opportunity to create a new start somewhere else. Mark secured an interview at the University of Delaware and was hired as a creative director in their marketing department. He made the move to Willington, Delaware, while his wife stayed behind in South Carolina to lease their home. Mark spent over a month settling into the couple's new home on his own. During this time, he spent a lot of time with Meredith Chapman, his supervisor, who was 15 years his junior. 4 weeks later, Mark and Meredith shared a kiss after having dinner together. Although troubled by feelings of guilt, Mark expressed that there was an undeniable attraction between the two of them. Not being able to control their feelings, the two continued to see each other and had fallen in love before Jen even made it to Delaware. Jen immediately sensed that something was wrong when she arrived in December. She repeatedly asked Mark about his relationship with Meredith, but he insisted that it was strictly professional. It wasn't until Valentine's Day in 2018, when Jen said that she had access to his text and call log, that he finally admitted to the affair. The marriage went downhill quickly after this, and Mark was planning on filing for divorce in May. Meredith, who was also married at the time, took a job offer in Randor Township, Pennsylvania. Her husband didn't make the move with her, as she was also planning to file for divorce. Jen had a lot of resentment toward Mark and began seeing a divorce coach to help her cope. In the weeks before Mark was planning to move out of their home, Jen requested that the two of them spend some quality time together as they say goodbye to their relationship. Mark reluctantly agreed and said that even though Jen became emotional at times, she seemed to be acting normally. On April 23rd, Jen and Mark had made plans to meet for dinner to discuss divorce arrangements. Jen texted Mark to let him know that she was running a little late. She then sent him a text telling him to go home because she wasn't going to make it. Just minutes later, Mark received a photo message from Jen of the contents of a trash can, with the focus being on a condom with its contents. She captioned the photo, "You ruined my life. I hope you never find happiness. Bye, Mark." Mark immediately tried to contact Meredith after recognizing the photo. When she failed to respond to his text, he rushed to her house where he'd been staying. He found the bodies of both Meredith and his wife Jen. Jen had shot her husband's mistress before taking her own life just inside the entryway of the house. Hurt by the betrayal of her lifelong partner, Jen took things too far. Mark has stated in interviews that he wishes he could go back and change what happened, and said that it should have been him who was killed that night and not Meredith. Number 1. On October 1st, 2017, at 10:05 p.m., Las Vegas, Nevada experienced a horrible tragedy. From the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino, Stephen Paddock fired more than 1,000 bullets into a crowd of people gathered around to enjoy a Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. 58 people were killed and 869 were injured. 6 days before Paddock terrorized Las Vegas, he checked into the hotel with 10 shooting range bags and a computer. He then paid for the suite connected to his room and utilized both rooms for the remainder of the day. During the investigation, police found 23 rifles and 1 handgun in his room. Some of the rifles were equipped with high-powered scopes attached to them. He'd fired into the crowd in rapid succession for 10 minutes before abruptly stopping. It's believed that at this point, Paddock took his own life inside of the motel room, where his body was discovered an hour later. Handwritten notes were found amongst his belongings that detailed calculations of him and his accuracy to increase his odds of hitting his targets. Ammonium nitrate was found along with tannerite, and 1,600 rounds of ammunition were found in the trunk of his car. When police searched his home, they found 19 more firearms. Less than 48 hours before the shooting, Paddock sent a series of text messages to his mistress. After asking her if he was able to talk and telling her that he was really struggling and wanted to meet with her, he sent her a chilling message. In retrospect, the message shows signs of instability. It read, "There are so many people who don't deserve to be alive. Too many people are so concerned with themselves. You can be there for everyone, but when you need someone, there's nobody to be seen. I became reclusive for that reason. The best way to live life is with a wall between you and everyone else, so that when they hurt you, the sting isn't so bad." He expressed that he felt people in society had become evil, self-loathing, selfish, and entitled, and that being disconnected from other people was the only way to cope with this. Although these statements can be seen as a warning sign now, knowing the events that transpired after they were made, at the time they were words spoken to a woman by a man who was deeply hurting and troubled. Even had she taken these messages as a threat to harm others and reported them to law enforcement, Paddock would likely have still carried out his horrific plan before authorities could have reached him. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. If you loved it, maybe consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.